Solutions. I'm your host, Jean Newell, and in the studio with me today is my co-host, Jonathan Lack. Hello, Jonathan.
Hello, Jean. Thanks for having me back.
Yes, let's talk a little bit about real estate since that's our forte.
That's what we talk about.
It's everything from foreclosures to feng shui, if we don't get done tired of saying that. Jonathan, just as a recap, tell us a little bit about all the things that you provide and services that you have at your offices.
Well, Lack & Lack Chartered are transactional real estate attorneys. It's me and my father in practice together. And we also have Waterview Title Services, which is a full-service title insurance agency to assist with the closing of your residential and commercial real estate transactions. And finally, we have Waterview Realty Services, which is our real estate brokerage, of which you are one of my fine agents.
Well, thank you very much. And, we're out there. We see everything happening. We see new construction coming out of the ground where we have people that have 30-year-old homes that are trying to sell them, and they're trying to compete with new homes. So we're out there as consultants. We're out there as designers. We're asked all kinds of questions. And today we have a great expert on. And I'm just going to keep him a secret for just another minute or so because, I got to thinking about the topic we're going to be talking about today, Jonathan. And what do you think the foundation of our society really is? I mean, you think back of years ago, what did we use all the time? You think about it, what is out there that we use all the time? For food, for shelter, or...
Let's go with wood.
Good answer. Ding, ding, ding. That's exactly right. I got to thinking about this because we have a tree expert on. But if you think about it, our whole society revolves around trees. They're there to with our food, our shelter, our furniture. I think even the first cars, not the motors necessarily, but the cabs of them and the wheels. I mean, everything in life has been around using trees. So with that kind of an introduction, I don't know what made me think of all this, but if you think about it, and we even use trees for our different slogans or expressions like branching out, right. The tree of life, ancestry. It's all about your family tree. Everything is about trees. So with no further ado here, I'd like to introduce Christopher Johnson. He is an arbor advocate, and he's a certified arborist, and he is here to explain what an arborist does and why you may need one for your home. Welcome, Christopher, to the show.
Hi, Jean. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure to have you here. I always have projects going on at my home, and when I have a project going on, I always think, I bet my listeners would also like to know about this, and I'm having a tree removed out of my backyard. And then that's how we kind of got in touch with each other. But I don't think a lot of people know exactly what an arborist is, because when I ask a couple people, they just automatically go to a forester. They don't think in terms of an arborist for everyday use or for your own family lot or your own family services. Tell us a little bit about what an arborist is and maybe your background on what you have to accomplish and what kind of certifications to be an arborist.
Well, an arborist is pretty basically anyone who works in trees professionally. You don't necessarily have to be a certified arborist, although I would recommend hiring a certified arborist if you needed tree work done for a couple different reasons. A certified arborist has taken tests and has a breadth of knowledge that most regular arborists do not, and they're also bound by a certain code of ethics, much as you are, Jean, as a realtor, I'm sure. And there's just the breadth of knowledge that they have is definitely superior to someone who just has a chainsaw and a pickup truck and
right.
They cut trees.
Right. And sometimes we go to the big box stores, one of the Home Depots and Lowe's, and we walk in and we see a tree and a barrel, a bucket, and we take it home, and we really have no clue on whether that's right for our soil, right for our lot. We don't know anything about that except that it's $69 and we're going to put it in our trunk of our car. And that's about what people think of when they buy a tree.
Absolutely. That's it a lot of the time. And people are upset and they think, oh, I don't have a green thumb, or, oh, I'm lousy at growing things. But maybe they just put the wrong tree in the wrong spot necessarily. Mm-hmm. Many trees have different needs as far as soil acidity or alkalinity, and it's a great idea to consult an arborist before you plant a tree, because it may be a small tree now. 30 years from now, it may be looming over your house, and then it's a real problem. And it's much more costly to maintain than had you planted it in the more appropriate place at your home, or planted a more appropriate tree altogether for what you were looking for.
I know we've discussed this. I've been in my home 30-some years, and I seem to not be able to have a shade tree. I want a shade tree in my backyard, and no matter what I plant, it gets to about 10 years, nice and shade tree. I get something fast-growing. And my neighbor can have the exact same shade tree, but during a hurricane, mine always come down and theirs doesn't. So I used to say, and maybe I'm going to be correct when we get into this one, taking this one out, I think I'm on a spring. I think my backyard is on a natural spring, and it's just too wet back there for certain trees, because it just seems like they topple down and no one else's does, and I can't quite figure this out. But lo and behold, I'm going to have a shade tree in there somewhere along the line, and you're going to help me figure out which one to put back there.
Well, to help our audience out there, as far as Christopher Johnson with the Arbor Advocates goes, when planning a lot, let's say I'm building a new home, and maybe even working with a builder, but they work on the home, they work on the tile, the flooring, the cabinets, all of that stuff, but rarely do we get involved in the landscape design, and landscape design ultimately is very important. Do you assist with both landscape design and what goes into some of the decisions other than simply aesthetics?
That's a fantastic question. Most of the time, I don't really get into what most people would call landscape architecture, except where it relates to trees. Like tree protection zones are often put in place during construction to protect the tree's root system if it's already there and we're working around it. And I also will consult to homeowners who are wanting to plant trees after the construction has taken place as to what would be a good tree and where would be a good place to put it. Much of my background was actually in power line clearance. I spent over 13 years working in power line clearance, and many, many times we saw beautiful trees planted right underneath the power line, and they weren't beautiful for very long because the power company has to come through and their contractors cut a V through it or cut an L through it or cut it in some way, top it down, and it really ruins the aesthetic value of the tree for many homeowners.
Right. So you speak of then the protective zone. For example, I have a lot out in the Grant Valcaria area, and well, I'm not at the moment. If I wanted to do some building on that lot, would I consult with you on the trees that are there? I mean, I'm obviously to build on it, I'd have to do some clearing, but would I consult with you about what could stay and what could go, or how to work, to build and not destroy the more older substantive trees that are there?
Absolutely. That would definitely be a great idea to consult with an arborist to determine what trees are vigorous enough to endure the construction project, and also what would be necessary to protect the tree's root system from soil compaction or even mechanical damage from heavy equipment.
Great.
I know I was on the internet researching some of the tree information, and something kept popping up that it says, if someone offers to top your tree or to make it safer, kick them off the property. Tell us a little bit about it. It says here topping was accepted 45 years ago, but now science has since shown that's the worst thing that you can do to a tree. Another bad sign, someone who wants to come in and reshape your trees in such a way that perhaps it's not going to be beneficial for them. Tell us a little bit about this topping off your tree.
Yeah, it's Gene. Topping is horrible for trees because the tree wants to have a top. That's the reason that they grow vertically. In most cases, trees start out as young trees in an excurrent fashion, meaning they're growing essentially straight up. And as they mature, they get a more rounded or decurrent shape. When you top a tree, most of the time what happens is the tree will try to replace its top with faster growing, more weakly attached shoots, which become weakly attached leaders, and those are typically the portions of the tree that fail, especially through our rough Florida weather.
So we're coming up on hurricane season. Is it start June 1st, July 1st? It's too soon. Whenever it starts, I'm already
June 1st.
sad. Yeah,
June
so
1st.
We're there, unfortunately. But again, what happens is exactly that. I have a yard full of trees, and I got guys coming by all the time saying, you really need to get those trimmed. What do you recommend is the proper way to go about handling that as opposed to the yard guy coming along and say, do it for $50?
Right. I would have an arborist come in, and they can do a risk assessment, which is one of the services that I offer is tree risk assessment. And what they'll be looking for primarily are dead wood, limbs that may be overextended. Maybe you've heard the term lever arm. You can hold 5 pounds close to your body, but when you put 5 pounds out further away, the heavier the load is away from you, the harder it is to hold up. The same is true for forces in a tree, whether it's just gravity by itself or whether it's potential wind-loaded force or any force for that matter.
So would you, as part of your services, in addition to the risk assessment, do you provide the trimming service, or do you provide the advice and then recommend a trimmer?
Sometimes I will do both. I'm very busy this time of year, and a lot of the recommendations that I make that I can't do myself, I recommend Tree Service Express. Nick Rocco runs that operation. He's an outstanding arborist, and I'm fully confident in his abilities there. So I have no problem referring that out to him and his organization. And I would definitely recommend
and toward
doing
that end, why don't you give us your contact information so if people have questions, they can reach out to you?
They can reach out to me at arboradvocates@gmail.com.
Okay, great. And Arbor Advocates then is the name of your company. And
yes,
again,
sir.
It's Christopher Johnson.
And Tree Service Experts, or Express, I'm sorry. Shall we give out this number? Is that good?
Absolutely, yeah.
866-412-0820. This is actually how I first got in touch with you, as I had this tree service come out. They came up on Home Advisors, and we like to trust the Home Advisors. One of the things that Brian over at Tree Service Express had told me, I have a Schefflera that my neighbor would cut down from time to time with my permission because he didn't like the leaves falling in his yard. And this last time when he cut it down, it still was about 6 foot tall. He cut all the branches off. Those doggone Scheffleras, grow overnight. It never grew and never grew, and it started to rot. And I said, this is unusual because any time, my mother and father used to take bushes right down to the ground to make them stronger and healthier. And I said, can't understand. And Brian was telling me that if you use clippers from another, maybe you were clipping a dead tree, branches off of a dead tree that was diseased, and you use those same clippers on another tree, you can actually transfer that disease. Do you see that a lot with trees as well when they're sawing them and so forth?
Absolutely. We see that quite a bit, actually, and that's another reason that I would recommend a certified arborist do the trimming that's required as opposed to Joe Schmo's tree service or whoever's off the street because especially at Tree Service Express, they disinfect and treat their tools and equipment from job to job and even from tree to tree. Sometimes if there's an infected tree, they'll sterilize everything and then move on with the rest of the job because some tree diseases are communicable even within different species, but definitely within the same species. If you have one particular palm that's infected with a disease or one tree that's infected with a disease and you have several other trees of the same type and species, the rate at which that disease can move around your yard is alarming.
What's that disease that's going around right now in Brevard County and it's affecting some of the palm trees? Tell us about that and how we can correct that.
There are a couple. I'll hit on the two main ones. Lethal yellowing disease is one of them. And also the biggest is Texas